I have a studio audience and they're raring to go, and I've got my pipe because we're going to speak about schoolish kind of things. This is a pile of some of the textbooks. We're starting to collect textbooks here. Feel free to send yours in. We're starting to do research on all of them and find the stories that are printed in our textbooks and then compare them to what the truth is. And it is shocking. I have seen a lot of things in my life. I mean, I'm an alcoholic. Trust me, I have stories. But the one thing that has shocked me more than anything else is reading history. Reading history. You will start to read history, and if you, as Jefferson said, question with boldness even the very existence of God, if you really start to question and you start to read, you will start to slip into a zone where you think, okay, wait a minute, one of these is really wrong. You've been taught one lie, I think, your whole life. As I started my search for answers, through book after book after book, it became apparent that the history we're being taught isn't always right, or most times it just isn't the complete history, and so it makes it entirely inaccurate. Sometimes it's because of, you know, somebody who is lazy or a lazy media that didn't care to find the real answers. Sometimes it's because people do see things through a different prism. That's why you can have two people that witness a car accident, but they'll say something else, something different, each of them. That is natural. But the problems that we have with our history many times is malicious, progressive intent. Progressives have been changing history for about 100 years. They knew they had to separate us from our history to be able to separate us from our Constitution and God. When you look at the complete pictures of some of the most revered figures in history, when you look at the complete picture, all of a sudden you're shocked. Every time we do this, how many have seen the Founding Fridays? Okay, you've watched them. How many of you have looked at an episode and been a little hacked off at the end because you're like, wait a minute, that's kind of an important piece of history? Have you? You have? You've watched it, and yeah. It is, our history is being stolen from us. I saw a poll that came out, I don't know, a week or two ago about, you know, the best presidents in history of America. FDR, #1. In the top 10, always, Wilson. Wilson and FDR, they did more to destroy the Constitution than practically any other president or all other presidents, present president excluded, combined. FDR, Wilson, both used emergency and war to justify just running around the Constitution. FDR ran for a 3rd and 4th term. There's a reason Congress instituted official term limits for the president after FDR died. They didn't want him to happen again. Well, how did they love him so much that they had to put term limits on the president? That doesn't make sense. That's because you're not receiving the full picture of FDR. Most of us were never taught about the Depression of 1920. Who knew about the Depression of 1920? Anybody here? Two people. Two people knew about the Depression of 1920. Why don't you know about it? Because the way they fixed it isn't in the progressive playbook, and it led to the Roaring Twenties. How about the near depression of 1946? Has anybody heard about the near depression of 1946? We were about to, yep. Did you learn? You learned it from this program. Okay? Why don't you know about that? Because they cut spending and they lowered taxes. We were never taught about 20 or 1946. We were never taught about Woodrow Wilson. Woodrow Wilson was a racist of the first order. This guy was a spooky, spooky dude. He subverted the Constitution. He locked people up. He invented propaganda. I mean, state-sponsored propaganda. He was the man that Goebbels learned it from. FDR, what do we know about him? Maybe you know that he tried to stack the courts, but you don't really know why or anything else. All you really know is FDR saved us from the Great Depression, and Woodrow Wilson was the champion of the worker. That's because history has been changed. That's why my eyebrows raised when I heard Michelle Obama say that we needed to change our history. What does this mean, America?
As a country. And Barack knows that we are going to have to make sacrifices. We are going to have to change our conversation. We're going to have to change our traditions, our history. We're going to have to move into a different place as a nation to provide the kind of future that we all want desperately for our children.
Why would we have to change our history? Why would we have to change our traditions? I like our traditions. Change our history? Well, as you will see tonight, it's being done. I wonder if changing our history is what we're seeing with the late Senator Robert Byrd. Here's a guy who was in the KKK. He was recruiting people to join. 150 people he convinced to join the KKK. Now people like Bill Clinton and Barack Obama coming out of the woodwork to defend this guy because he was, quote, just trying to get elected. Wait a minute. It's okay to stand with people who are lynching, convince people to go burn a cross in some dude's yard because of the color of their skin because you're just trying to get elected? And yet conservatives are now being considered racist because they support Arizona's immigration policy. This guy gets a pass for the KKK because he's trying to get elected. Byrd also filibustered against the Civil Rights Act when he was 47 years old. This isn't a youthful indiscretion. Somehow getting a pass, but conservatives can't even say something nice about Strom Thurmond or they get disciplined, just like Trent Lott did. He got thrown out. Look how the New York Times portrayed Thurmond and Byrd. Strom Thurmond, here it is, the headline, New York Times. Strom Thurmond, foe of integration, dies at 100. Same paper, New York Times, on the death of KKK member and filibuster of the civil rights movement, Robert Byrd. Robert C. Byrd, a pillar of the Senate, dies at 92. It's interesting to me that both obituaries were written by the same person, Adam Clymer. How could he see those two people so differently? You see, you have to go beyond what the news tells you. You have to go beyond what the politicians tell you. You have to go beyond what I tell you. You have to come to your own conclusions about our history with facts. Read original sources whenever you can. I'm convinced when you see the original words of people like Margaret Sanger or George Washington, when you see the facts, the evidence is overwhelming. But either way, you've got to look at history because you're not getting the complete truth. Tonight we try to restore history of people who you think, these books will tell you they're heroes and they may be villains. Some people who are villains may actually turn out to be heroes. With us tonight, Larry Schweikart. He is the author of the new book, 7 Events That Made America, America, a great book. Also, he wrote the best-selling Patriots' History of the United States. Every American should own that book in their home. And Burton Folsom Jr. He is the author of another great book. I learned more about FDR in New Deal or Raw Deal, how FDR's economic legacy has damaged America, and the myth of the robber barons. Gentlemen, I want to show you, first of all, because will you both agree, you're historians, will you both agree that it was the progressives that did this for a reason? They've changed our history.
Yes. Yes, sir, deliberately.
Okay, why?
Well, it's what progressives do. They reshape the past in order to make policies for the present. That's the definition of historicism. That's this thing that's brought over from Germany by the progressives. Let's change history so that we can justify what we want to do in the present.
Okay. This is Understanding by Design, a small learning community, high schools, New York City. This is a drafting template for curriculum unit plan. Okay. This is the curriculum for New York State schools on progressives. Listen to this. American history, subject area, America history, the progressive era. Unit summary. Progressivism was a reform movement that sought to correct the evils of big business practices, industrialization, and unsanitary conditions brought about by urbanization. Students will be able to see that the progressive leaders have come from different fields to reform the problems caused by industrialization. Students will also understand that progressive presidents have tried to bring about reforms to improve American society. Students will analyze the extent to which progressivism has impacted the future of the United States. Nowhere here does it talk about the progressives like Walter Lippmann, Margaret Sanger. Here it has several places where it talks about Woodrow Wilson, but in a positive light. Let's start with a little bit on Woodrow Wilson. Tell me about Woodrow Wilson's position on race.
He was an arch segregationist. He segregated the American Armed Forces.
Okay, not segregated before he got in.
Yeah, and segregated the post office as well, which is difficult, but he did that. And he reduced the number of African Americans enrolled in the federal government.
Did he not also, because he wanted to be a little more subtle, did he not also introduce that if you were going to apply for a job in the federal government, suddenly there needed to be a picture attached?
Yes.
Yes. So he was
the picture attached in the post office, right?
Right.
Because that would be one way to keep
right. Okay.
Segregated.
He also, tell me about this. I've had this in my briefcase for about a week. I haven't had time to watch this yet. This is a movie, if I'm not mistaken, wasn't this the first big silent movie? Yeah. Or the first silent movie?
Yes.
First big one?
Yes.
Okay. And tell me what it is. Birth of a Nation. Do either of you guys?
Well, it's basically the history of the Civil War and Reconstruction is seen through the eyes of a Klansman.
Okay. I've read, and I don't know if this is true, I have read that this was based on Wilson's writings. True or false?
I don't know about that.
You don't know?
I've heard that, but I haven't verified it.
You haven't verified that. This movie, would you agree that this is a very racist movie?
It is.
Okay.
Absolutely.
It glorifies the Klan.
Absolutely.
This movie was premiered at the White House. It was shown at the White House for Woodrow Wilson, who claimed that it was one of the best movies, of all time. It will really tell American history. Tell me about what Woodrow Wilson did at the universities when African Americans wanted to apply. Now at Princeton, there is, if I'm not mistaken, the African American scholarship. I think it's the Woodrow Wilson Scholarship, is it not? And he said that it was nonsense or something like this for African Americans to try to get higher education. Did he not?
He certainly didn't believe that blacks had the capabilities to finish college, at least in large numbers.
Okay, so how did he get to be this guy who, at best, is neutral in the history books? Because I'd love to hear your opinion on this. Do you think that the theory that Woodrow Wilson really was the reason we had World War II is accurate? He defanged Britain. He forced Britain into dropping their ally, Japan, did he not? He was the one who really pushed with the League of Nations, the peace treaty, and all of that debt that Germany had. I mean, he's really, the progressive ideas were the ones that set the world up for World War II.
He was an internationalist in that sense, for sure. He wanted the League of Nations. He wanted power to gravitate toward the League of Nations, away from the United States, certainly, or individual national entities. But I think it's his redistributionist policies that also make him very popular with textbook writers. When Wilson came in, we didn't have an income tax, at least one that was operable. The 13th Amendment came in 1913. Then we get a progressive tax. We're taxing the rich more than others. And that tax is raised up to over 70% by the time he gets out of office.
And he promises that it'll never go over 10, didn't he?
Those were the initial promises. It would never go. It was 7. The first rate was 7, but it's over 70. Now, of course, we have World War I coming in.
Which he promised would never be fought.
Right.
I'll keep you out of war.
But then in 1919 and 20, when the war was over, the tax remained high.
Did he not say when America thwarted him on the League of Nations, he said basically what Barack Obama has said during healthcare? Well, I haven't explained it enough. And he went on a whistle train tour of America to try to explain it. When America rejected it, didn't he say, I think I've read this someplace, that it's God's will and God won't be thwarted on this, right?
He very much believed he was operating for God and that it wouldn't be thwarted, and thus he was very surprised when it was, in fact, thwarted.
Now, it was under the Wilson administration, at least, that social justice started working its way into the churches. Was that part of Woodrow Wilson?
This actually predates Wilson. You get these guys like Walter Rauschenbusch and the whole progressive theologians who believe in this notion of redistributive justice and sharing of all the goods. But Wilson believes that he's on a, to quote John Belushi, a mission from God. He's here to remake the world. And you mentioned Versailles. He goes into Versailles and he gives away the farm. He gives the British what they want. They don't want a German army. All right, whatever. No German Navy. The French don't want a German army. All right, fine. No German army. The Italians want land. Okay, you get land. All I want is the League of Nations. He gives away everything that you can actually get in order to obtain something that you can't have, which is international peace and love and harmony.
And that's when everybody went kind of underground. Progressivism got a really bad name.
Very bad.
So they just changed to liberals, right? And kind of reappeared again under FDR and just put it all through. They learn from their mistakes.
Right, they did. But the 1920s obviously was a very bad decade for progressives. We had budget surpluses every year.
Okay, when we come back, Hillary Clinton has said, well, she's not a hero in all things. She doesn't, she knows she was a person that had some flaws, but she admires her. Margaret Sanger. Let's introduce you to the real Margaret Sanger, another progressive hero, when we come back.